amor, chora, choro pelo meu caminho, já toquei nas cordas, chorei. Eu também já calei meu choro.
It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
And it's a very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa. Stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Welcome to it. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. Remember, you can watch or listen anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za. And you can also find us on the DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You'll also find us on YouTube as well as Facebook. Let's go to our top stories.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
Let's start with this. Zimbabwe, where motorists have expressed displeasure after the government announced another fuel price increase for the second time this month. Diesel now costs approximately $2.05 per litre, while petrol has risen to $2.17 per litre. The country's Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube says the government considered a number of factors before arriving at the decision.
The issue of fuel pricing is beyond government's control. It is a byproduct, a result of the ongoing war and tensions in the Middle East, and government is doing all it can to cushion our citizens, to cushion our businesses. So we have some principles that we've followed in adjusting prices in response to the international prices. First of all, we recognize that this is not something that we produce locally, it's imported.
Two brothers who are medical professors have been commended for their work by South Africa's Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Professor Mashudu Chifularo performed the world's first middle ear transplant in 2024 at the Steve Biko Academic Hospital. His brother, Dr. Nyaweleni Chifularo, led a team of multidisciplinary health professionals in separating conjoined twins on Tuesday at the Mankweng Hospital outside of Polokwane in the Limpopo province. Motsoaledi has expressed gratitude to the brothers for remaining in public hospitals.
Wanted to thank the Chifularo family because many of you might not know Professor Chifularo here, who did this groundbreaking operation. His brother is a professor of ENT at Steve Biko. He also did the groundbreaking operation. He is the first person in the world who did that middle ear transplant at Steve Biko Academic Hospital, planting the small ear bones we call ossicles using titanium and 3D technology. That was never done in the world. So it's a blazing family. We want to thank them, and we thank them for staying in a public hospital.
The House of Traditional and Khoisan leaders in South Africa's Eastern Cape province has called on government to take immediate action against those implicated in reports of a Nigerian national being coronated in that province last weekend. The Provincial Traditional Authority has condemned this development and believes it undermines the rule of law. Next week, a march will be held in condemnation of the alleged coronation. Deputy Chairperson of the House, Nkosi Kwazinaba Matanzima, says such action must be addressed.
That should go through the institutions that are recognized. We do have the House of Traditional Leaders in various provinces. We have Contra Lesa and we have COPTA. Anywhere between those structures, the individuals must actually raise rightfully the claim so that we are able to actually entertain what the individual is bringing forth. There are reports already that the Department of COPTA is approaching the Nigerian embassy, which we are welcoming. There has been a word from Contra Lesa on this matter. We are yet to hear from Dr. Schreiber the CRL and the Premier, Oscar Mabuyane, on what they will do about this thing.
And finally, Kuwait's biggest oil refinery has been hit by drones as Iran continues to respond to U.S.-Israeli attacks. Both Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates said their air defenses were responding to a barrage of missiles and drones from Iran. The BBC's Azadeh Mushiri has the report.
News came this morning from the state oil firm KPC in Kuwait that an oil refinery had been hit by multiple drones, that emergency crews battled a fire there but had to shut down multiple units as a precaution. And this was already a scenario that these countries in the region had desperately wanted to avoid, the energy sector being brought into this war. On top of it, in Qatar, they're still assessing the damage, severe damage, at the Ras Laffan energy field.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
It's 6 minutes past 9. Banks are vital in efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change, acting as both major financiers of high-carbon projects and key supporters of the green energy transition. This is according to some of those who will be attending Channel Africa's African Matters Summit. It's taking place next week, Wednesday, at Wits Business School in Johannesburg, South Africa. Echoing his colleagues' sentiments, Head of Business Ecosystems and Sustainability at Standard Bank, Dr. Manasseh Alagbaoso, says the bank has taken a leading role in financing climate-related activity in South Africa.
As the biggest bank in Africa, we have taken a very important leading role in financing climate-related activities across Africa. I will give you some headline numbers. You probably have seen that in the news that we have a target of mobilizing 450 billion rands by 2028. As at the end of 2024, we achieved 177 billion of that, and by the time we close off our mobilization for 2025, we would have achieved over 200 billion of that. But importantly, a sizable portion of this mobilization is related to business and commercial banking, which is the business unit where I am. So when we talk about supporting Africa and its sustainability objectives, it's important to ensure that it gets to small and medium enterprises and not only big projects that has to do with corporate entities. So not only are we playing a role as a financial institution, we also play a role in making sure that the social equity and social upliftment of these communities are taken into consideration, ranging from us launching a training program, Sustainability Academy, for all businesses in Africa that is not being paid for. I normally don't say it's for free because we are paying for it, but it's fully subscribed to these businesses, whether they have relationship with Standard Bank or not. We do believe that it is important for these businesses to operate from a position of knowledge, for them to understand what sustainability is, what climate change is, the risks that come with it, but importantly, the opportunities that come with it. So, and that has been running since August last year. We also ensure that part of our measurement is not just on how much money was mobilized, but we have what we call social metrics or impact metrics that really look at, of all of this, how is it impacting job creation in communities? How is it unlocking economic activities within rural areas? How many women-led or women-owned businesses are part of this initiative? And making sure that the stats you normally hear about Africa in terms of electricity access and all of that, we are actually bringing that stats down instead of allowing it to continue to go up. So we are playing a leading role in this space.
And that there was from Standard Bank, Dr. Manasseh Agbaoso. He was speaking about the upcoming Africa Matters Summit that is taking place next week, Wednesday, the 25th of March at the Wits Business School, Donald Gordon Auditorium. It's a project between Wits and Channel Africa launching the first of the summit, and it's really focusing on Africa's recovery just with regards to climate change.
Franschhoek, get ready. The vibe is happening this March. The Monroe Jazz Festival Franschhoek is bringing more than 30 local and international acts for one unforgettable weekend, including DJ Zinke, DJ Kent, DJ Kent Zero, Layla Hathaway, Robert Glasper, and Bilal, plus many more. From 27 to 29 March 2026, experience the music, the culture, and the energy. Grab your tickets now at ticketmaster.co.za. Monroe Jazz Festival Franschhoek. Feel the energy. Live the moment.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
It is 11 minutes past 9. You are listening to Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the Africa Perspective. Welcome to it. I am indeed Tsepiso Makwetla. Thanks for joining us. A major diplomatic milestone has just been reached in the South African capital of Pretoria following a high-stakes working visit to union buildings. South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile has successfully concluded a bilateral meeting with the President of South Sudan, Salva Kiir Mayardit. As Pretoria's special envoy to South Sudan, Mashatile has been at the forefront of driving the revitalized peace agreement, and today's talks are said to have secured critical commitments ranging from support for South Sudan's upcoming December 2026 elections to new economic partnerships in mining and transport. For more on this, let's speak to acting spokesperson for the Deputy President of South Africa, Keith Khoza. Mr. Khoza, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. So we say critical commitments. I've mentioned two of them. Just tell us a little bit more just about what is actually being sought with this. Is this in a bid to aim the escalating hostilities that we're seeing in South Sudan?
Well, the issue about South Sudan has been about the issue of peace, the need for elections, stability in the region, which has seen South Africa being thrust at the very hectic end of things in trying to facilitate peace. It started a long time ago. President Cyril Ramaphosa, when he was deputy president, was also a facilitator. David Mabuza was a facilitator as a deputy president, and now Deputy President Paul Mashatile has been given that responsibility. The idea is to ensure that we put into action our words, where we commit to peace in the continent and also to assist achieve a peaceful resolution to conflict. And that's the commitment that South Africa has carried the responsibility with. So the visit of President Riek Machar,
Of Salva Kiir, President Salva Kiir.
Salva Kiir was partly in pursuit of the need to push, to have a final push. As you would know that there was an agreement that there would be elections at the end of this year for South Sudan. There has been a revitalized agreement that was pursued by United Nations, the African Union, and as well as those that the C5, which are 5 countries that were identified to assist with the peace process. So the visit reaffirmed the need for elections this year, but it didn't only stop there. It went further to talk about the need for economic cooperation between South Sudan and South Africa. A broad framework was identified that covers issues like education, economic cooperation, we're looking at trade, we're looking at also in things like the waiver of, the possible waiver of diplomatic visas, visas for people who hold diplomatic passports and official passports. These are some of the things that have been identified that would require new attention, urgent and new attention for South Africa and South Sudan. They also are starting a process of a dialogue where they invited South Africa to participate and share their experiences from CODESA 1 and 2 to see how it can assist them to expedite the peace process.
So let me just jump in there. When you speak about CODESA and you speak about Sudan's peace process, as you mentioned, Deputy President, a firm supporter of the revitalized peace agreement, the United Nations has warned very recently and repeatedly that Sudan is at a very dangerous point. And one of those stickler points has been the imprisonment of Deputy President Riek Machar. What has been conversation between President Salva Kiir and Deputy President Mashatile on that aspect?
Well, the focus was really on areas of agreement. You would know that Riek Machar still remains imprisoned. There is a legal process that is currently unfolding. And one of the things that President Salva Kiir raised with us was that please do not interfere with the legal process. Let's allow the legal process, insofar as it affects Riek Machar, to run their course and come to a conclusion of sorts. So that process is unfolding. South Africa will not interfere with the legal process.
So South Africa may not want to interfere with the legal process, but if they are seeking that South Sudan advice on processes like CODESA, which also ultimately meant arriving at a common understanding, reaching agreements on contentious issues. Honestly, I don't see how Deputy President Mashatile would not mention it. He may not interfere, but if he is to give advice on how to reach a common understanding towards peace, that is not something that I see President Salva Kiir successfully getting away with. Don't touch the issue of Riek Machar.
No, he wasn't saying don't touch it. He was saying there is a legal process that is unfolding at the moment, and that they are asking everybody, including the C5, even AU and United Nations, not to interfere with that process as it is unfolding. And it is a legal process that will find a solution to a particular problem. So indeed, Deputy President Mashatile would raise issues about concerns about. Remember, when we engage in South Sudan, we don't only engage with the ruling party. We also engage with all other parties that are part of the revitalized agreement. So it is in the interest of everybody to know that everybody is on board on issues, and that when they raise concerns with us, we do transmit those concerns to them.
And I'm glad that you raised that, because we have seen a growing coalition and even sprouting of opposition movements, and some of those have coagulated over the imprisonment or perceived sidelining of Deputy President Riek Machar. So what one is trying to get a sense of, and one is not overlooking the importance of the positive advancements and agreements that have been made. But if, for instance, there is technical assistance being sought on how to implement the peace roadmap, there would have to be conversation about what are the urgent steps that need to be taken. We have thousands of people who have been slaughtered, people, 100,000 more who have been displaced. There are actual war crimes taking place in South Sudan. These are things that I have no doubt that Deputy President Mashatile takes very seriously. has there at least been some sort of conversation about how urgent these matters are, how they could be ameliorated at this point?
Well, certainly they become the centerpiece of whatever discussion you have. Remember, the issue that we're trying to resolve here is conflict, it's war, and the desire to achieve peace. So when you pursue peace, you need to highlight what is it that is undermining peace. And having done so, you then say, how do you resolve those issues? For instance, when they spoke about the dialogue that they've agreed to initiate, and hopefully it will start around April. The idea is really to ensure that all conflicting people are part of that dialogue. Because if they are not, it is going to be a monologue of those that want the dialogue against those that do not agree with those who want the dialogue. So what it has to be a holistic and all-inclusive process that will ensure that we usher peace in the region, in the country and in the region.
All right, let's look at some of the conversations that were had, and I want to know if there was a formal memorandum of understanding that was signed, for instance, regarding mineral exploration.
No. Those were teased out as area of possible cooperation, which are now going to be referred to line function departments so that they come on board and engage. For instance, one of the things that happened is that President Salva Kiir was with the special envoy, or his personal special envoy to South Africa, who raised sharply the issue of a peace summit between South African business and South Sudan business. Their view is that there should be a connection point that looks into what is possible beyond just the issue of peace and everything, but how do we help them restart their economy and activate economic development, much to the benefit of the people of South Sudan.
And South Africa, if it were to fully participate as a business partner, I'd imagine that Deputy President Mashatile would have put on the table some of the challenges that South African businesses face, particularly when it comes to issues of infrastructure, transportation, energy. Was that conversation had? Because I know a lot of South African businesses and businesswomen who are looking to invest in Juba, but there have been major logistical problems that have been faced.
Well, I think the idea of a business summit is also to look into those nitty-gritties and those challenges that may confront any attempt to cooperate economically. Remember, one of the things when you set up these processes is to identify challenges and how to overcome them. For instance, the regulations in different countries that hamper any initiative that is meant to grow the economy. So the idea is really to say, what are the issues? How do we resolve them? What will it take? And the other countries must also reciprocate in terms of adjusting their laws, regulations to facilitate business.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That is acting spokesperson for the Deputy President of South Africa, Paul Mashatile, Keith Khoza, speaking to us there, and it brings the time to 9:24.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, Email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
26 minutes past 9 as South Africa marks Human Rights Day on Saturday, a not-profit organization dedicated to transforming the lives of children and the youth in South Africa. Africa Tikkun has warned that failing to teach children about their rights in practical, accessible ways is compounding an already deep crisis. Human Rights Day commemorates the 1960 Sharpeville massacre, where 69 people were killed by police during a peaceful protest against the apartheid pass laws. To speak further about this is Diani Mohlaba, COO of Africa Tikkun. A very good evening to you, Diani. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Let's just first start with the idea of creating Africa Tikkun and what it means. Why is it specifically targeting children and the youth?
If you look at the history of Africa Tikkun, how it was founded, our former president, first president of the Democratic South Africa, loved children. Former President Nelson Mandela, who basically went and met with one of the founders of Africa Tikkun, Dr. Bertie Lapner. He said, let's form an organization and prepare children for a future where they can enjoy the life that we all envisaged, meaning his generation, when they were fighting for the liberation of the people of South Africa as a whole. Okay. So Tikkun basically is a Hebrew word for healing, heal Africa.
So as I asked, if you could just take us back to the founding of Africa Tikkun, let's just focus on that and then we'll talk a little bit more about the state of South Africa's largest demographic.
So the youth of South Africa basically is at the cornerstone of Africa Tikkun's mission. We exist to create socio-economic conditions that will help youth realize their full potential. And that's why, talking about human rights in the context of children, as a human rights-based society and organization, this subject is very key, to our very mission that we are talking about today.
Okay, so according to Africa Tikkun, what do you see as the state of children and the youth with regards to human rights in South Africa?
We take children's rights and human rights in particular very seriously. And if you look at the state of, the rights of children today, would you say they have rights? Do they know them? In our environment, we make sure they do know them. Currently, the right to education, it's a non-negotiable for our country and society at large. So we believe we've got a solid foundation to address that. And we just have to continue on that trajectory and make sure that these rights continue to be protected and respected. Mm. So they may be voiceless, as it were. However, we cannot have any empowerment of the future generation of our country if we don't respect and teach them about their rights. So this weekend is basically about that. How do we as families and communities sit down and teach our children about their rights and the tools in which they can access in society, including, currently parents feel that they don't have any tools since the corporal punishment, for example, was taken away, from schools years ago. So how do we then make sure that we sit down with children, we educate them about their rights so that they understand them? But rights, as we know, come with responsibilities, and we need to also engage collectively as families and as a community around that.
What do you see as the biggest threat to South African children? I mean, we know there are huge levels of unemployment. The safety of children and the youth are one of the largest concerns because of the high levels of crime. But also, there are countless graduates who, despite having hardworking parents, or some of them from parentless households, manage to scrape together money to get them to school, but there are no opportunities. But to you as Africa Tukun, what do you see as the largest threat to children and the youth in South Africa?
The largest threat comes to the point that, yes, I have a right to education. I went to education, higher education institutions, I got a qualification, but then my right is not really realized because I cannot find employment. I cannot find a job. So we need to make sure that we go back to basics, we need to revisit our education system to help young people to transition into income-generating opportunities. And how we do that is to make sure that our trade schools, as they were, are brought back. TVET colleges in the main are the only government, run institutions post-matric, that is, to train our young people in technical trades. And unfortunately, as communities and as a society, we've taught young people that those kind of trade skills in being an electrician, being a plumber, a welder, are shunned at, looked down upon, and it's a wrong thing that we need to change. Wearing, overalls and working and building the country from one brick to another, creating skyscrapers. It's those are the skills that are required to build the economy and keep young people employed.
What are you going to do to observe Human Rights Day then tomorrow, which is Saturday, and what is your appeal to the country with regards to children and the youth?
So tomorrow, in one of our centers, we, in collaboration with the Constitution Hill, we the people, South Africa, will be participating in an event where young people will basically be taught about their rights, the Constitution, how did it start and why was it there? And I mean, as we commemorate Sharpeville, that at the core of that was basic, human rights for the people of South Africa across the board. So we continue to partner with organizations like that, and let's work together to basically educate young people, our children, about their rights without, taking away the responsibility that they have. If, for example, I usually say to my kids, I have a responsibility to take you to school, to clothe you, to make sure that you have something in your stomach to focus in school. You have a responsibility to make sure that when we do that, to invest the time and energy to bring you up, you study, you focus, you engage whenever you've got problems, you talk to parents, to your teachers, and then people that you can trust in society to make sure that you have a safe environment wherein you can thrive. So as Africa Tikkun, that's what we're all about. Children who come through our doors are taught that they have the rights. And children, we know that if children understand that they have rights, they are more.
All right, Mr. Mhlaba, it seems like our line has unfortunately cut us off, but we thank you for your time and sharing with us. Tiani Mhlaba is the Chief Operations Officer of Africa Tikkun, speaking to us about what they're going to do to observe Human Rights Day in South Africa tomorrow on Saturday. And of course, their focus will be children and the youth.
Clear your diaries for the 25th of March, 2026. Channel Africa, in partnership with Wits Business School, invites you to a climate change conversation that goes beyond talk. 3 powerful panel discussions. 1 stage. Big questions, bold answers. If you care about the future and value honest, intelligent discussions, this is your seat at the table. Join us on March 25 for Africa Matters. Climate change. Financing Africa's recovery. Only on Channel Africa. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has issued a stark warning calling for an urgent end to the escalating conflict involving the United States and Israel. Speaking alongside European Council President Antonio Costa at the European Union summit in Brussels, Guterres cautioned that the war in the Middle East risks spiraling out of control with devastating consequences for civilians and the global economy. Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe has this report.
As the war enters 21 days with no end in sight, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has made a call for an urgent de-escalation, warning that the intensifying conflict between the United States, Israel and Iran risks spiraling into a crisis with global consequences. His appeal comes at a time when the Middle East is witnessing one of its most volatile military confrontations in recent years, marked by sustained airstrikes, retaliatory missile attacks, and growing fears of a wider regional war. Speaking on the margins of the European Union summit in Brussels on Thursday, Guterres urged an immediate end to the conflict, citing its severe humanitarian impact and far-reaching economic consequences for developing countries.
Let me start by 2 clear messages. First, to the United States and to Israel. It's high time to end this war that is risking to get completely out of control, causing immense suffering on civilians and with propagation around the global economy that is really dramatic, with potential tragic consequences, especially for the least developed countries.
Guterres also urged Iran to halt its attacks on its neighbors, highlighting the growing threat of wider regional escalation and severe economic fallout, particularly for the world's most vulnerable nations, while calling for the rule of law to be upheld and for diplomacy to take precedence.
Second message to Iran: stop attacking your neighbors. They were never parties to the conflict. The Security Council has condemned these attacks, has ordered them to stop, as it has ordered to open the Strait of Hormuz. The prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz causes enormous pain in so many peoples around the world that have nothing to do with this conflict. It's time for the force of the law to prevail over the law of the force. It's time for diplomacy to prevail over war.
European Council President Antonio Costa praised Antonio Guterres for his leadership during the ongoing crisis, reaffirming the European Union's strong support for multilateralism and the United Nations. Speaking alongside Guterres, Costa emphasized the importance of upholding the international rule-based order, describing the UN as a cornerstone of global stability in these turbulent times.
It's a great pleasure to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations. The United Nations is a key institution in the international order. And now, in these very troubled moments that we are living, more than ever, it's decisive to uphold the international rules-based order, to support multilateralism, and to support United Nations action. I would like to commend especially the determination of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres to lead the United Nations in such difficult moment.
In addition, Costa warned that without a strong international rules-based order, global instability from Ukraine to the Middle East and Africa will deepen, while reaffirming the EU's unwavering support for United Nations and the leadership of Antonio Guterres.
A lot of international actors are challenging the international order. But what we are experiencing is that, in fact, there is no alternative for the international rules-based order. Because the alternative is chaos. Alternative is the war in Ukraine. The alternative is the war in Middle East. The alternative is a humanitarian dramatic situation in Gaza. The alternative is wars in several countries in Africa. Then we need to uphold for the international rules-based order, to support the multilateral system, and to support especially the United Nations. And I want to ensure to the Secretary General that the European Union will continue to be the great supporter of your work and the work of the United Nations.
Meanwhile, European Parliament President Roberta Metsola stated that the European Union will continue to advocate for de-escalation in the Middle East conflict that has a direct impact for Middle East and Europe.
We will continue to ask for de-escalation. What we saw this morning happening over the last hours has a direct impact on the region, but also on Europe, not only in terms of security, but also in terms of rising prices that we see on energy sources that we are dependent on. So that is what we will continue to insist on, and we hope that a resolution is found.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
And that brings the time to 19 minutes to 10. As you know, it's a Friday, our 2140 feature. It is a Friday. Normally you try and look at music, and we have been looking at the Montreux Jazz Festival for the past couple of weeks. So it literally is a week away. So the first time in history, as we've mentioned before, the legendary Montreux Jazz Festival is coming to Africa, and it'll transform the picturesque Valley of Franschhoek in the Western Cape of South Africa into a global stage for world-class artistry, taking place from the 27th to the 29th of March 2026. The inaugural Montreux Jazz Festival, Franschhoek, brings together a curated mix of international icons and African innovators. And one of those who will be taking part is Grammy-nominated American vocalist Stacey Kent, an artist globally renowned for her delicate storytelling and multilingual repertoire. A very good evening to you, Stacey. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Hello, and thank you for having me. It's a delight to be with you all.
Are you excited about the event taking place next week?
I am so excited. You know, we've played at the Montreux Jazz Festival before in Europe. We've been to Switzerland, and we've been to the continent of Africa. But these two things together, the inaugural festival of Montreux and Africa together, is something extraordinary. And to be asked to be part of the first one has made me feel very honored. I'm very, very excited.
So where in Africa, might I ask, have you been before, Stacey?
I have been to South Africa a few times. Okay. I went as a youngster because we had an exchange student at my school in the USA from South Africa, and I ended up going there a couple of times to stay with a family, kind of in my own sort of exchange student sort of way, and explored a lot just as a kid. I was only 17 years old. I saw some of the most stunning, beautiful landscapes I have ever seen in my entire life. I am an outdoor person. I live in rural Virginia. I love Mother Nature. And when I landed in South Africa for the first time, and I landed at dusk, and I saw that sunset with those silhouettes of trees, it was indescribable. And so that has been just burnished into my memory. Then since then, I've been there a few times to perform. But this is something new and very special to be part of the first one in this particular place. So every time it's very, very special. Every time it's almost like it's the first time. We never get complacent about the fact that we tour as much as we do. We've been in about 60 countries already. 60 is not nothing. And yet we still have this desire to come out and be part of the world and the community. And so this trip coming up has got me, as you can hear, really thrilled.
Look, there's nothing like traveling and meeting new people, as you say, also encountering new spaces. And there's absolutely nothing like the South African sky. So you just stopped me dead in my tracks. I was about to brag about just what a wonderful country and people we are. So glad you've been here before you've experienced it. So tell me then, what are your thoughts about your upcoming performance at the Jazz Village? It's at the historic Kerk Church, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Knowing South Africa's history and also the Kerk Church, it's very, should I say, contested history in some cases, particularly for its role in South Africa's pre and post democratic history.
Yeah, of course, and that is very much part of the story. Here's the thing. First of all, the people speak to me and I speak to them. I do what I do for a living because I love to communicate with people. I love people, and I think community is the most important thing there is, that we share art together, whether or not we're the performer or the person who is there and engaged in it. You know, to be part of that history, it just happens to be. I am very lucky that I saw what I saw as a teenager because it helped form my vision of the world. And I saw South Africa back then, and I see it today, which fills me with joy to watch the world evolve the way it does, and also fills me with sadness to see what happens in the world. And when things are as difficult as they are and chaotic as they are, what we do is make music and make art and join in community more intensely than ever, you know. And so of course I am aware of those things, and so to be there and come back to that place that I knew as a youngster, that is, it's not that it's at the forefront of my mind, but of course it informs my entire being and sensibility and performance, because what I get to do with my life as a performer, as a singer of these songs of love, is I get to engage with people regardless of where we are in the world and realize how similar we are. You know, if you fall over, right, whether you're in South Korea or Finland or America or on the continent of Africa or anything, when you fall over and you doink your elbow, it's going to hurt and you're going to say the same things. You stub your toe in the same way. We have the same joys, we have the same hopes, we have the same sadnesses, we have the same grief. I get to live in a realm where I see people as the same, even if our daily day-to-day is different. The rest of the world is so much of the time spending so much of their time looking at how different we are and pointing out to those disparate aspects of us. I love this privileged position of being where we are all together. So to join in that place, and I've seen the pictures only because I haven't been to Franschhoek yet, the building and the area and Mother Nature completely speak to me and fuel me for my performance there. And all the people who've interviewed me so far about my performance keep talking about this intimacy that I have. Yes, that's right. I love that people see that. I want to talk to people as individuals and as a community and celebrate that and acknowledge the balance of the joy and the sadness. And this is why, you know, I guess I have the intimate style that I do, because I am just a person talking to other people and sharing stories.
So this is what then I wanted to ask you, because it's interesting that you bring that up. You're multilingual. So how do you address people as individuals in a collective? Because if we're talking about jazz as a living, evolving language, there are different ways of expressing that, as you know, and there are different ways that appeals to people. So what is your approach here, especially going from Geneva to South Africa, you know?
Yeah, this is also an interesting aspect because I grew up with a grandfather in the house who grew up in France. And so I was very lucky to be exposed to French language and French culture very young. And he taught me this language And once he taught it to me, it was the only language we ever spoke in. And I think that I learned early on, as many people do who are bilingual, that your sensibility doesn't move, but you do move from, you do alter a little bit differently as you speak, because muscularly you're using different things. And so my approach, it's a pretty natural approach when I sing in other languages and when I talk to people or I listen to music. I want to bring this up too, because I'm not just a performer and a musician. I listen to a lot of music from countries where I don't speak the language. So I can feel taken away and transported when I listen to something from, let's say, Turkey, a band from Istanbul, and I don't know what they're saying. I feel the language and the music and the emotion on a more abstract level, in the same way that people do who might come to the show in South Africa who hear me sing in French or Portuguese, who don't speak that language, but they can relate to it emotionally on a more abstract level. And so I just let this happen kind of naturally and seamlessly without really giving it too much thought.
Mm-hmm. But Stacey, I'm not sure if you can still hear us, but there obviously is a lot of thought that is conjured up by literature, which is something that your artistry blends into. So just tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm fascinated by your work with Kazuo Ishiguro. How did firstly that come about, and just tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Okay, this puts the biggest smile on my face because it was the biggest game changer in my life. And that is to say, very quickly for people who are tuned in who don't know this, in England, there's a very famous, decades-long running show called Desert Island Discs on the BBC. And every Sunday, for decades and decades, they invite famous people of different walks of life. Maybe somebody's a tennis player, maybe somebody's a writer. And they invite them over to this radio show to talk about their life and their work, just like you and I are doing. But they play a game all the way through the show, which is, if you were stuck on a desert island for the rest of your life with only 7 records, what would you listen to? And Ishiguro was on one day, and he chose one of my records, singing They Can't Take That Away From Me. I cannot describe to you how that felt, because I was a huge fan of Ishiguro's work. I wrote to the BBC and I said, "Hi, I'm Stacey Kent, and Ishiguro just played me on the radio. Can you send him a thank you letter from me?" Long story short, I mean, because it's a long friendship now, this was in about 2000, and he got in touch with me, and we became great friends. And it all started to make sense because we had a very shared vision of the world. There was a reason why he loved my music and why I loved his books, why I loved his novels. It wasn't about 6 or 7 years into the friendship that we started to work together on music. So it came again very naturally. One day we were at a lunch, and Jim, my partner and my husband and my saxophone player and producer, and Ish, we call him Ish, said, "You know, we should write a song for Stacey." And this just blossomed into something incredible. That is the first album, Breakfast on the Morning Tram, in 2007, that got the Grammy nomination that you mentioned and went platinum and just kind of exploded. And that was amazing for me on my career level. But for me personally, it was huge because it meant something so authentic. I grew up in a family of teachers and literature professors. We always read aloud in the house. Literature is a huge part of my background. And so when I storytell, I think that I learned very young that whenever I tell a story, whenever I say something out loud, it's my way. I don't have to be anybody else. I don't have to think about anybody else's version. This is my story that I send out into the world. And to have Ishiguro writing these stories for me and Jim composing the music is so personal. And it's hard to describe how it feels to sing those songs. Among the other songs that I sing, of course, from the Great American Songbook and from the French Chanson Songbook and the Brazilians, they all just fit so well together.
So let's get personal. How did you and Jim get together? What brings you together? I mean, you've just mentioned what appeals to you and what created that wealth of experience with Ishiguro. With Jim, as you mentioned, you work together, you share musical language. What brought you guys together?
Well, this is another kind of pinch me story in my life. I think this is why this has allowed me to have just such an open, optimistic attitude through life. You don't know in 2 days from now who you're going to meet, who's going to change your entire life, you know? Vinicius de Moraes, the great Brazilian poet, whose music I sing a lot, wrote this thing about o arte de encontro. It's the art of meeting. Jim calls it having your taxi light on. You just don't know. If you're open to people, you don't know who you're going to meet who's going to change your life. And when I met Jim, I was just graduating from college. I was visiting some friends in Oxford, and he was just graduating from Oxford. And we met, and we looked at each other, and we just both went, oh, it's you. It was so crazy. One of those love at first sight moments. And we both ended up on the same postgraduate course in music at the Guildhall School of Music. And 1 year later, after the course was over, it was so clear that I wasn't going home to America because I had fallen so crazy in love with him. And so I stayed, and I applied for my visa and then my British passport, and we got married, and we started our career there. But none of that was planned. I was always planning on going back to do my master's in literature and language. And so my whole life, my whole path completely changed. I love that about life. You just don't know who's going to pop up at any point, who's going to change everything. And it was the same way for me with Jim and with Kazuo Ishiguro and so many people I've met along the way who've changed me.
Just listening to you sound like such a great storyteller. I can literally listen to you all day. So, Stacey, then let's look at the coterie of artists that are going to be at this festival. I mean, it is just absolutely amazing. Your Robert Glaspers, your Ezra Collective, Tandu Somazwai, Wet, Rizwan Murphy. I could go on. So, which of these artists, and I'm not asking you to, be outside of what you would normally do, but just what are you looking forward to? Who are you looking forward to interact with? Are you hoping to do any work with any of these artists in future?
So I get to stick around for a little while. So I'm very, very excited because often when you come into town, you hit and run, right? I'm actually there for 3 days. I plan on devouring absolutely as much as I possibly can before I have to fly back to continue my tour in Europe. So I will be sat there. People will see me listening to as much as I possibly can because the lineup is fantastic. What I also love about the lineup is just how diverse it is. I mean, I think that the Montreux Festival here has done a fantastic job in the inaugural to give people. Here's the thing, when people come out in festivals, you know what happens. People are much more open to hearing music and seeing music that they might not generally listen to. You pick up a lot of things that you end up falling in love with at festivals because of the diversity. And so, I mean, all the names you just mentioned were all so different and have something else to share with the audience. And people will be there for those 3 days. Just going from mood to mood and shifting around with all of these different combinations. It really is a glorious inaugural festival. I am not kidding. I'm very happy to be part of the first one. And our set will be quite intimate. We are just three, but just three is something else because I'm there with Jim Tomlinson and Art Hirahara, my pianist. The three of us have been together performing for over 20 years. We are great friends. There's great dialogue on the stage. And the thing is, talking about what we were referring to earlier in terms of the intensity, sometimes we go out with big bands. Sometimes we're 5, sometimes we're 6, sometimes we're 9, sometimes we're 60 when we're with symphony orchestra. But when we're 3 and you hear everything and it's so vulnerable and you hear all of the different harmonics coming from the piano and from the saxophones and the flutes, it's, for me, perhaps it's the most powerful. I love that. And so I feel like it's kind of right that we're bringing this band in amongst those bands, which will be bigger and a little bit more wild, right? And we get to be in amongst that. I think it's going to be part of such a journey for the folks who come out and listen. So I'm not going to pick one, but I really will be there just listening to everything.
And final question, what about South African food? Is there a particular South African dish that you like, that you've liked in the past, or that you're looking to try? Because I think you're spoiled for choice when it comes to South African culinary.
Yeah. So, we have eaten so well. And I'm a fruit and vegetable lover. I eat pretty much what Mother Nature put out there. Those are my favorites. I will say that I have one little personal thing that happened in my life that might not be this specialty for you guys that you're referring to now, but I had my first ever samosa when I was in South Africa. Yeah. I was a teenager and I was at a cricket match and I was given a samosa and I just went, wow, what is this? And I've loved them ever since. But for me, that is because my own personal story of being there is related to that. That is very much a South African thing, even though it's an Indian food. But and Jim cooks Indian at home, by the way, all the time, so we eat them a lot here. But I will be wining and dining. I will say, just as a little footnote, that March 27th, the day I perform, is also my birthday.
Oh.
So we will be doing, a lot of celebrating on a lot of levels with a whole beautiful, room full of folks coming out to hear the music and celebrating my birthday and eating and drinking and enjoying the views.
I'll tell you what, wishing you all the best, and from us at Africa World Hour, happy birthday in advance.
Thank
and I'm
you.
sure you're going to have an amazing time, amazing performance, and we look forward to having a chat with you again sometime in the near future.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. Great to talk to you. We're so excited.
Thanks, Stacey. Keep well. That's Grammy-nominated American vocalist Stacey Kent, who'll be one of those performing at the Montreux Jazz Festival. So remember, it is 27 to 29 March, so that's next weekend. It's happening in Franschhoek, the first time on African soil, so don't miss it. From us, it's good night. Up next, Jayla Ndukumana with African Diaries.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa.